Hi, and welcome back to Map the Maze. So today I wanted to address a question that somebody sent, which was, what do you do about hatred? I wanted to talk to you about a couple of elements that I think it's important to understand about hatred, talk about some of the options around what to do about it, and talk about some of the consequences of hatred. The first thing is to talk about what is hatred. I would say that I think we've probably all experienced feelings of contempt, disgust, anger, rage, bitterness, loathing. I could go on, but it's a pretty negative list. The thing that's key is that it is directional. It is directed at a specific object. And when I'm working in divorce mediation, it's typically the other partner is the target of that hatred. And one of the key elements to hatred, which is why I think it is such a destructive emotion in mediation, is that instead of trying to focus on restoring the self that feels injured or finding a way to get more because you deserve it, hatred is about minimizing, punishing, demeaning the other person because they are the hated opposition. And the challenge with that is it may be justified. I have no idea, and it's certainly not my place to judge. However, what I do know is that if you focus on punishing the other person, on demeaning the other person, what you are losing sight of is what do you actually need in mediation. And that, for me, is the biggest challenge with hatred, is that it takes focus away from what should be the focus of everybody in the mediation, which is, what do I need to get out of this mediation? What do I want to get out of the mediation? And understanding all of those things, what are my priorities? The challenge with hatred is that it stops some of the thinking, it stops the focus, and I think it stops the ability, because what I have seen, and I've only seen, I don't know if this is encouraging, I've only seen a few cases where hatred was a real factor in the mediation. And in each of those cases, there was such a focus on punishing the other person for the wrong that had been done that it was almost as if the person was willing to cut off their own leg because it might inconvenience the other person. So it's that level of, I will self-harm if I think it might in some way harm you, if I think there will be a detriment to you. And from my perspective, that's incredibly short-term. It may feel good. It may feel good in the short term to have punished the other person, to have made things difficult for them, to have made it, I don't know, difficult for them to see the children or interact with them or participate as a parent or focus on their lives and be able to move on. But in the long term, I think the consequence of that is more pain for you. That, I love Shakespeare. In Macbeth, one of the lines is, "He that but teaches bloody instructions, which being taught return to plague the inventor." And what Shakespeare's saying is, you can do this terrible act, Macbeth, but if you do that, then the chances are it will return to harm you. And in fact, if you have seen or read Macbeth, you know that's what happens. It does not end well for him. And so I guess I would say is that's a key lesson. There wasn't actually hatred in that case. It was just greed. But anyway, and envy. However, apart from that slight digression into Macbeth, there is this concern, I think, that if you are on this path of hatred, not only is your mediation negotiation going to lack focus on what it is that you actually need, because there'll be a lot of focus on what makes things worse for them, which may or may not meet your needs long term. But I think the other challenge is it really has health, physical, mental health consequences, which I think are too serious to ignore. The other thing I would say, and this is really from Forgive for Good, which is I'm going to talk about in a second. So that's the book by Dr. Fred Luskin from the Stanford Forgiveness Project. One of the challenges is if you really hate somebody, the chances are that your perception is that they have done something to harm you, to hurt you. And for me, the question is always, why do you want to give them more power? Why do you want to give them more airtime? Why do you want to spend time thinking about them when they obviously don't care about you? And I think that's really helpful in terms of how do I start thinking about other options? Because if you have decided that somebody has done something so terrible that you now hate them and want to punish them in your divorce, why would you want to think about them for a second longer than you have to? Why would you want to give them that power to impact how you feel, to impact your health, to impact your ability to sleep? So I just think there are a lot of reasons to consider the options. What are the options? So if you do hate the other person, I think there are a couple of options. The first option is obviously continue. Stay on that path, keep hating them, allow yourself, I think, to lose focus in the mediation and to lose focus on what it is that you actually need to be able to move on with your life and to move forward. And if you have children, to lose focus on what it means for them to have two co-parents who can function. I'm not saying function cooperatively. I'm not saying everybody goes away for Christmas together, but at least two co-parents who can function when they need to talk about issues that impact their children. So I think it's an option. Second option, find a way to release the hatred. And I'm not saying, again, move to a position of, I hate you and now I love you. I'm certainly not suggesting that, because for most people who are divorcing, that love has gone. That whatever has happened to bring the relationship to an end has destroyed the memory of that love, maybe even. And all I am suggesting is that there are ways to move on. One is Forgive for Good. And I think it's incredibly powerful. And I say that as somebody that has used it and has followed the path, the step-by-step guidance for forgiveness. And I think it's really important that sometimes when people hear about forgiveness as a tool for themselves, there is a misconception. And I think that comes from how we're taught as children, that forgiveness is something that we do for other people, that it's about saying it's okay. Forgiveness is actually none of those things. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's not about saying it's okay. And it may not even be about telling the other person that you forgive them. That's what I think is so powerful, that Luskin is able to explain that actually forgiveness is a gift for you. It's to free yourself from the pain, from reliving the pain, from renting that space in your head for the pain. And I think that's a really positive message. He backs it up with lots of evidence around health, mental health, physical health benefits. But I think that's something to really think about, that if you decide, I'm going to try option B, which is to let go of the hatred, then forgiveness is probably going to be part of that journey. And if you want to start in a small way, I think reading the book is great. Following the steps, really helpful. The third way is to actually work with somebody. And I have had clients who have worked with therapists where the pain over whatever events have led to the end of the relationship has been very intense. And working with a therapist, working with a counselor, someone who is really responsive and well-trained, can really help to move people on. I remember talking to somebody who started their intake session. This is that first meeting one-on-one, telling me about the terrible things that the other person had done. And I anticipated, because I've been in that intake before, that this would mean we would need to spend quite a lot of time talking about how they felt about the other person, and that I would then need to work very hard in the mediation to help them try and focus on, well, what is it that I actually need? What are my priorities to be able to move on? And I was astounded, I can still remember the feeling, when they said, but it's okay because I've been working with my therapist and these are all things I'm dealing with in therapy. We don't need to talk about them in the mediation. And we didn't. It was remarkable. But it's another indication of why mental health support, whilst you are going through your divorce mediation, is so beneficial. Because what it meant is, for that person, they didn't need to spend time in the mediation trying to punish the other person, score points, humiliate them, make me think that they were a terrible person. It meant they were free to focus on what they wanted to try and achieve in the mediation, what their priority needs were, and what they could achieve together to get this resolved. So from my perspective, it is worth thinking about one of those options, preferably options B or C, because I really think holding on to their hatred, it may be short-term satisfying, but long-term, I think people do at some stage hopefully let go of their hatred and are able to look back with regret maybe on, if only I had focused more on what I actually needed, this mediation would have been better for me long term, or the arrangements would have been better for me, or things would have been easier for our children long term. Lots of reasons to think about letting go of the hatred. I appreciate it is hard, and that saying all of these things is a million times easier than doing any of them. I would say, though, the one case that I really think of when I think about hatred, where there was so much hatred that it not only impacted the negotiation, it impacted the children of the family, it impacted the way in which even we could conduct the mediation. But it also, right up until the very last session, there was an agreement, which I hadn't entirely been expecting, but they managed to put an agreement in place. But every part of that agreement was filled with bitterness and was designed to punish. And all of that, I think, could have been easier for everybody, for both parties and for their children, definitely, if some of that hatred had been released. If that person had been able to move on from some of that hatred. You can still really dislike somebody, but had been able to move on from the hatred and had been able to focus on what they actually needed to achieve in the mediation for their well-being and their health going forward. But again, as I said, it's always a choice. So if you think this might be you, think about, is this the choice that I want to make? I think some people can fall into this trap unconsciously, subconsciously, without doing it in a conscious way. Don't sleepwalk into hatred. If you think you might be hating somebody, think about, is this serving me best, or is there something that I should be doing to help myself? Okay, thanks. Fun talk, hatred, and I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye.